Well, everyone, welcome back. I am so glad that you're here with us today. This teaching is originally going out on Memorial Day weekend, first official weekend of summer. It's a happy time. But I also know Memorial Day for many reminds us of what we've lost. And whether you've lost someone to military service or you've just lost a loved one and you're missing them this Memorial Day, you're remembering them, I just want you to know that our heart is with you. We pray for you. And may the God of all comfort give you grace and peace and hope for the future. But what we're talking about these days is a series about our mission in the world called Bless, Missional Rhythms for Everyday Life. You know, ever since God decided to save the world, He started somewhere. He has to start somewhere. And He started with a man named Abraham. He said, I'm going to bless you and you are going to be a blessing. I'm going to bless you and one day through your offspring, Jesus, the whole world will be blessed. And that's God's strategy for saving the world. It's a kind of pay it forward strategy. He blesses us. We pass the blessing on to others. But what does that look like in real life? That's the whole point of this series. That's why we have this BLESS acronym. We started last week with the B. Bring goodness. Bring your good self, bring your good gifts. We talked about all kinds of ideas of how we can just bring goodness to our world. Today, we're talking about the L, which is listen well. Now, to talk about listening abounds with ironies today. I mean, first, this series is about getting the good news to the world. Good news is something you speak, you share out. The New Testament Greek word for good news is the word evangel. What do you do when you have good news, when you have the evangel? You evangelize. You proclaim it. You preach it. You share. That's the nature of good news anyway, isn't it? It's like, it's coming. I can't hold it in, whether you're ready to hear it or not. And yet, today, we're going to talk about how really, if we want to be good evangelists, we're going to start by listening well. You know, a second irony is that this is a sermon about listening. How odd that we're going to talk about listening via a monologue. I promise I'm going to practice what I preach just as soon as I'm done talking at you. So it's ironic. And you know what? In a third way, painfully, I am doing a sermon on listening. You know, I'm a professional speaker. I'm actually world class at it. And I don't say that because like my content or delivery is so brilliant. No, I'm a talker. If there's a topic on the table, I've got thoughts and ideas. I got words and I'm not shy about sharing them. I am a pro talker, but I am a novice listener. And, you know, maybe in certain respects we all are. I read about one communications professor who said, imagine that someone else's talking is like your arm. It extends from your shoulder to your hand. That's their talking. How long is your listening? And his class all typically says about as long as the elbow. Right? About the time they're halfway through saying what they've got to say, I'm formulating what I have to say. You know, someone else once said that the opposite of listening is not speaking. It's preparing to speak. I look like I'm listening to you, but I'm actually getting my mind loaded up with what I want to say and reply. And oh my goodness, I don't always even get to the elbow. So I have a lot of learning to do on this. Maybe you do too. I mean, chances are we all, in some respects, are novice listeners. I read the work of another researcher by the name of William Ikes, who studied how people interact and how well listeners understand, empathize, relate to the person across from them. In fact, he came up with an empathic accuracy scale, like 1 to 100, empathic accuracy. How well am I really reading you and understanding and perceiving your thoughts and emotions? And what Ikes discovered is that when you're having a conversation with someone that you don't know, many people grade at about 20%. They're really only reading the other person about 20% accurate. Now, if you're talking with a family member or a friend, someone that you know and you have a history with, he's discovered a lot of people score about 35. There's about a 35% empathic accuracy. You're picking up more of how the other person is doing or feeling, but you're not all the way there. In fact, William Ikes found that really good listeners, by and large, if you're a good listener, your empathic accuracy is about 55%. And he says, that's kind of bad news on two fronts. One, even good listeners miss about half. But what's worse, we all think we're good listeners. Most people say, I easily pick up half of what another person is thinking and feeling. But in reality, we don't. Maybe in some respects, we're all novice listeners. And let's adopt that posture today as we learn more about good listening. Because, listening's not just a skill. In many ways, I would say it's a virtue. And when you think about other virtues in life, say humility or generosity or love, do any of us ever arrive? Can we ever say, I have mastered humility? No, we're all lifelong learners in these areas, and I think we are with listening as well. But thankfully, we know someone who has 100% empathic accuracy when it comes to reading us, and that's Jesus. And Jesus was not just a good listener. He was a great listener. He listened so well. And I want to take us to just one little story in the Bible that bears this out. This is a story that you can find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but I'm going to read it from Mark's Gospel. This is Mark 10, 46 to 52. It says, Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and said, Call him. So they called the blind man. Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. The blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. Jesus said, Go, your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, I just love this little story. You can look at it and listen to it and ponder it for a long time, and it'll keep giving up insights to you. It has great wisdom for novice listeners like me. So let's consider just some of its lessons. First, good listeners honor others with their full attention. That's what good listeners do. They give another person their full attention. And that's what we see Jesus doing here. Jesus is busy. He's on his way to Jerusalem. He's got a crowd of people around him. But he hears this man's cry and he stops and says, Call him. And him, he has a name, which is itself instructive because of the many healings that Jesus performed. Very few people are actually named in those stories, but this one is. This man's name is Bartimaeus. Now, his name is instructive to us, but it depends how we hear it and how we see it. Linguists, some trace the name Bartimaeus to Aramaic roots. They say this word is Aramaic, in which case it means son of defilement, son of corruption. But other linguists look at Bartimaeus and say, I don't think it traces back to Aramaic. I think it's Greek. And in that case, Bartimaeus means honored son, highly prized. Well, which is it? Well, you know what? In some ways you could say it depends on how this person, Bartimaeus, is treated. All of us ultimately come to know ourselves and esteem ourselves by how well we're known and esteemed by others. Most of the people in this story are treating Bartimaeus like the son of defilement, the son of corruption, someone who's not worthy of their time or energy or attention. And this is the way it goes in most societies. All societies have what some like anthropologists call a recognition order. It's unwritten rules about who gets recognition. There are those that deserve or are deemed worthy of more, and those worthy of less. And we all know how this works, right? I mean, if you're beautiful, successful, well-educated, you've got a bright personality, you get lots of attention. Otherwise, you're in the background. The beautiful people are the stars, everyone else is the townspeople. Well, in the little scene we have here, we've got a star, Jesus, front and center. But suddenly, we've got a townsperson like chewing the scenery, as they say in Hollywood. Suddenly, this guy's acting out and screaming and yelling. And people are saying, cut! That's not the way this goes. This is a big parade to Jerusalem. We're on our way to Passover. It's a big party. Stop ruining the scene. But Jesus doesn't see Bartimaeus as the son of defilement, but as an honored son, as highly prized. And so Jesus stops. And he doesn't even go to Bartimaeus, which of course he would be willing to do. But in this case, no. It's like Bartimaeus, guy on the margin, guy on the periphery. Call him. Bring him center stage. I want to center this marginalized person. I want to give my full attention to this person that you're overlooking and disregarding. And so he brings Bartimaeus right in front of him. And Jesus looks at him. And he listens to him. And this is what it really means to respect another person in their full humanity. Someone said, respect is a gift we give with our eyes and our ears. That's a good insight. That's how you know you're really respecting someone or being respected. Do other people give you their eyes and their ears? Well, Jesus gives this man his full attention. And he doesn't yell, cut. It's like, no, I'm going to ad lib and rewrite the script right here in real time. This is not the way the play goes according to the rest of you, but it's how my play goes. Stop. Bring this man to center stage. Let's interact together. Now, how do we give other people our best attention, our full attention? Well, David Brooks wrote a wonderful book. I couldn't recommend this book more highly to you. It's called How to Know a Person. It was published a year or two ago. It is a great, great read. Be great summer reading for all of us. And David Brooks, in his book, is full of wisdom. I'm borrowing many things I've learned from David Brooks today for this message. But he said, here's what you got to do with your attention. You got to treat it like an on-off switch. Not like a dimmer switch. Oh my goodness, as a husband and father, I treat my attention like a dimmer switch all the time. I'll give you 20% or 50%, but I'm mostly attending to this other thing. Brooks says, don't do that. Make your attention on or off. When you're talking to somebody, be all the way on. He writes this, you probably have so many thoughts dancing around in your head which threaten to hijack your attention from whatever the person in front of you is saying. The solution as a listener is to treat attention as all or nothing. If you're here in this conversation, you're going to stop doing anything else and just pay attention to this. Oh, that's a great challenge for me. That really is. That's good listening. It's like you're honored. You're highly prized. You are worthy, and therefore, here I am. With my eyes and my ears, I'm attending to you. Jesus was just a master at it. Here's the second lesson I think we learned. Good listeners ask good questions. Now, we all know this, don't we? Good listeners ask good questions. They're always kind of probing and inquiring. It's not just about what kind of great stories we can tell in conversation, but how well we can listen to what others have to say. And we want to know them and learn more about them, so we ask good questions. Now, the funny thing is, Jesus' question in this story doesn't look to us like a particularly good question. What do you want me to do for you? You could almost say, Jesus, if you're paying attention, isn't it obvious? Don't you see this guy's vacant stare, his beggar's cup, his cane? The man wants a healing. But you know, Jesus wants to hear Bartimaeus say it. Jesus isn't going to make assumptions that he knows or understands Bartimaeus. He's going to invite Bartimaeus to just simply reveal what he wants. What do you want me to do for you? It's actually a very good question. Bartimaeus is crying for mercy. What does mercy look like to you? Well, and of course, to Bartimaeus, mercy looks like me looking back at you, Jesus. Rabbi, I want my sight. It's really a good question to ask. And you know what? Many times, the best questions are the obvious questions. We just have to care enough and be curious enough to ask them. Don't overlook the obvious questions. Those are good questions. You might be greeting somebody and you're like, hey, how was your day? They say good. What question next is teed up for you right there? Yeah, what was good about it? Right? That's what you ask. Or maybe conversely, you notice someone, they look just a little bit stressed and haggard, and you're kind of like, hey, I could be wrong in this, but you look kind of stressed. What's going on? It's a question teed up for you simply by the demeanor of the person in front of you. Ask good questions and start by asking the obvious questions. Just be curious enough to want to know. I mean, my goodness, human beings, all of us, aren't we like layers of thoughts and feelings, desires and yearnings? The question is, does anybody care to know those things? Is anyone asking us questions to draw that out? Are we asking the questions to draw it out of others? Just be curious. Just ask the questions and then listen well. Good listeners ask good questions and they actually listen to the answers. Some people suggest using the SLANT method. We've got BLESS as an acronym. Here's another acronym, SLANT. Sit up, lean in, ask questions, nod your head, and then trace or track the speaker, with your eyes. Put your eyes right on the speaker. The SLANT method, that's how we listen well. We attune to people. We show them, mainly with our eyes and our ears and with our posture, that we're with them and that we're interested in them. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to come off as like overly eager. Some people seem like they're really bent on being your best friend and they want to ply you with questions and their eyes are wide open and they're so eager. And I don't know about you, but I've on occasion been put off by that sort of thing. Yeah, we want to use the SLANT method, but we want to be normal about it. David Brooks suggests another kind of mode of thinking, another technique that he calls the midwife model. The midwife model of listening. I love this. I mean, a midwife is there to support a person giving birth. The midwife is not there to give birth themselves or to force the other to give birth. They're just there to help. They might gently prod, but what they want to do is help the other person bring out what's in them. Midwives are there to support. They're there to help. They prod a little bit, probe a little bit, but mostly it's up to you. When are you ready? What do you have that you're willing and able to offer? Midwives are supportive. And that's what people need from us in our listening, especially people who are far from God? They're far from God. They're near to us. And what they want and need from us is good listening. Barna Research has actually proven this. They've interviewed a number of irreligious people who have no religion. But many of them, about 2/3 of them say, I actually have some friends who are Christians. And so Barna's sitting up and leaning in on that. It's like, okay, now I don't know whether you're really curious about Christianity or not, but just imagine that you are. Imagine that you were in a conversation with a Christian that you actually wanted to interact with. What's the number one thing you would want from them in that moment? And you know what the number one answer was? That they would listen without judgment. That Christians would listen without judgment. Before we get to proclaim and evangelize, share our good news, we need to listen to others without judgment. And you know, midwives are just great at this, aren't they? I mean, if a woman bringing something out of her screams in pain, the midwife doesn't say, "Don't be so dramatic." If it's time to push, the midwife doesn't say, "Well, that was a pathetic effort." And whatever comes out of that mother's womb, does a midwife ever say, "What an ugly baby"? "What an ugly thought"? "What a stupid idea just came out of you"? Of course not. A midwife is there to support and celebrate with you. We listen without judgment. That's what Jesus does here. "Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus says, "I would like to receive my sight." "Well, that's not the most important thing I could do for you, Bartimaeus. I could save your soul." No, Jesus doesn't say that. He honors the man with his question and with his response. That's what good listeners do. And then here's a third thing. Good listeners are good accompanists. Good listeners are good accompanists. That is, they accompany you. They're partners and fellow travelers, and they're just along with you, you know, putting in time, attuning to you as you attune to them, learning layer by layer about who you are, your thoughts, your moods, your perspectives, your just whole way of being in life. Good listeners are good accompanists. Or think about it more technically, like say in music. You know, you have a soloist, say a singer, and an accompanist on the piano. The goal of the accompanist is to play the piece well, but modestly. They're not trying to overshadow you with their runs and their flourishes. No, they're playing the piece so that you can shine, so that you can sing and say what's inside of you. And you know, if you get a little bit off somewhere, say, you know, you kind of lose the beat or, you know, you slow down a little, the accompanist comes with you. They'll slow down a little bit until you're ready to pick it up again. And, you know, that's the way it works in good conversation. We're not afraid of the process. We're playing the long game here with people. I mean, not that we're playing games with anybody, but we want to know people layer by layer so that they're comfortable with us and consider us good accompanists in life. We're not trying to meet a person and, like in the second conversation, lead them to Christ necessarily. No, it's like you put the time in just to get to know one another, to create the trust and the comfort level that might lead eventually to more significant conversations about ideas, about perspectives in life, about emotions, about pains and hardships, about beliefs, and about God. We don't go straight to those things typically. No, we got to build the whole context and framework that could bear the weight of deeper, more soulish conversations. Accompanists do this well. They're just patient with the process. One person calls these people lingerable. Like you can linger with them. And it's comfortable and it's okay. And, even if there are lulls in the conversation and there's a little bit of silence, it's okay. For some people, every silence is an awkward silence and they can't not try to fill that empty space. Good accompanists can just let pauses be pauses, can just wait. And they're not always probing with questions. They're willing to answer as well. There is a give and take in a good conversation. And, I just love how in this story, Jesus starts by slowing down. Bartimaeus is a beggar sitting on the side of the road. Jesus hears him crying and stops. Like a good accompanist, we'll slow down to right where you are. And then they have their exchange, and Jesus heals the man's eyes, and he says, "Go, your faith has healed you." But what happens next? Bartimaeus doesn't go. Bartimaeus comes along. It's like, go, like leave. No, I'm accompanying you now, Jesus. And Bartimaeus follows Jesus along the road, accompanies Jesus down the road. I don't know how far he went. We never hear from Bartimaeus again in the Bible. I'd like to think he followed him all the way to Jerusalem and maybe joined into the band of believers there. Who knows? Maybe 40 days later at Pentecost, Bartimaeus was one of the 120 in the upper room. We don't know. But there's always a journey aspect of life, right? We're always on pilgrimage together. And what we're really wanting to do as we bless the world by bringing goodness and by listening well is we're inviting them to accompany us as we accompany Jesus. Follow me as I follow Christ, Paul said. And that's really what we're looking to create, is an environment where we say, you know what? These Christians are lingerable. They're good accompanists. And boy, what they have spiritually and who they follow spiritually, that's a road I'd like to travel down too. I might want to accompany Jesus down along the road. That's what we're looking for in life, friends. And it's going to start and continue and be encouraged by good listening. I was praying through this passage the other day and just seeing this exchange between Jesus and Bartimaeus reminded me of an Old Testament story, Ruth and Naomi. If you know this story, they suffer tragedy. Naomi in particular suffers many tragedies. And she's been living a bit as a refugee in a foreign land. She's going to go back home. And she tells Ruth, the Moabitess, they're in Moab, hey, Ruth, you go, get on with your life. You're a young woman. You got a lot of years in front of you. I'm an old lady and a widow, and I'm alone. I'm going home. You remember what Ruth says famously in Ruth 1:16? It's like, don't urge me to leave you or to walk away from you. No, Ruth says, where you go, I'll go. And where you stay, I'll stay. And your people will be my people. And your God will be my God. And Ruth accompanies Naomi. And they both find their way to a future blessing they can't yet imagine. They find themselves in the line of King David, in the line of the Messiah. Bartimaeus calls out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy. The Messiah is the son of David. And Ruth became his great-great-great-great-grandmother. She accompanies Naomi, and it changes her future. Her life vectors in a whole different direction. Friends, that's what we're looking for with the people that we're speaking with, and more importantly, listening to. Listening is love. David Augsburger, a theologian and counselor from the 20th century, said this: being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. Being heard is being loved. Being listened to is being loved. Contemporary therapist Mary Pfeiffer says, paying attention is the purest form of love. To respect someone with your eyes and your ears all the way on 100%, it's the purest form of love. A renowned philosopher, Iris Murdoch, said, the essential moral act, the thing that does good to another person, the essential moral act is to cast a just and loving attention on another person. Ponder that one. A just, that is righteous and loving attention on another person. That is the essence of morality. If we exploit another person, we're dehumanizing them. We're not giving them a just and loving attention. On the other hand, if we somehow idolize them and put them on a pedestal, we're dehumanizing ourselves. That's not just or loving either. But to recognize another person's full humanity, they're honored sons and daughters like Bartimaeus. They're highly prized. Therefore, they're worthy of my just and loving attention. Friends, that's what it means to be a moral person. Or as Jesus said, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself by listening well. God help us all to grow, that the world might know how good and blessed life in Him is. The Lord be with you.
Thanks for checking out our online teaching. If you enjoyed this content and would like some more information about us, head over to our website at www.willowdalechapel.org or download our app. There you can stay up to date on any events, ministries, and other opportunities we have coming up at Willowdale Chapel.